Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Our next session is about to begin. I would like to request everybody to please either switch off their cell phones or put them on silent. The name of the session is Cinema and Society, a history of Pakistani cinema, edited by Ali Khan and Ali Nobil Ahmad. Our panelists are Ali Khan, Omar Ali Khan, Pran, Nevile, and Sumant Batra. The moderator for this session is Mr. Tariq Rahman. Dr. Tariq Rahman is an eminent scholar and academician. He received his first doctorate in English literature from the University of Sheffield in 1985. Subsequently, he studied linguistics at the University of Strathclyde and therefore authored his books on the linguistic history of the Muslims of South Asia, namely Language and Politics in Pakistan, Language, Ideology and Power, Language Learning Among the Muslims of Pakistan and North India, and from Hindi to Urdu, a social and political history. Beyond these and other books, he has published many articles in scholarly journals, contributed entries to encyclopedias, and chapters to edited books. The University of Sheffield conferred a higher doctorate on him in 2014. Over to Mr. Tariq Rahman.
Thank you very much indeed. This book, which you can find over there, beautifully produced book. When I was asked to write a chapter, I said, I know nothing about films, something which I say even now. But Ali Khan, one of the editors, still they were kind to me and they asked me to write a chapter, which I did. Now, since then, I've been wanting to hold them to account, both the editors, as to why they produced this book, what were the intellectual and other grounds for it, etc., and what they think to what is the intellectual contribution of this book. So first of all, I'm going to ask the editor, and then of course we'll follow the rest of the panel. So please, Ali Khan, bataiye.
Tariq Saab, thank you very much. I don't know if I thanked you enough for giving us the article itself, but talking very briefly, because I'm sure we'll have questions and answers later on about the conception of this book. Well, it actually began now 6 years ago in 2010 when my co-editor Ali Nobil and myself began to discuss about underrepresented areas of scholarship in Pakistan. And cinema just strikes you because at one point I think we were making close to 200 films in a year, making Pakistan probably the most prolific producer of film in the Muslim world, certainly. And apart from one book which Mushtaq Gazdar had written, there was really very little written on Pakistani film. So there was a need for something like this. And of course, scholars, academics, otherwise also are driven by personal interests as well. And both of us had an interest in film, and then Umar, of course, had shown us a number of the posters, which I'm sure he'll talk about, that he had. And so the sort of the visual element to the book also came about. But one of the things that we were very clear about was that this should not be an inaccessible book, which is why we wanted the book to be available for a wide audience. So they're journalistic pieces, they're academic pieces, there are humorous pieces as well. And when I spoke to Amina Sayyed, we made it very clear that this was the kind of book that we had in mind. And we felt that OUP was going to be by far and away the best option for us because they have a wide distribution, the widest in Pakistan. And, she was very, very clear about the quality of the work and the production values. And when I saw the book itself, I was extremely happy because the amount of work that OUP have put into this book is incredible, and I'm very thankful to them for having invested a large amount in this area. The edited articles themselves, from Tariq Rahman's work on language to areas such as sort of urbanization in Pakistan, urban space, the history of Pakistani cinema, both in East Pakistan and West Pakistan. We have chapters on language and ethnicity. We have chapters on the visual nature of films. We have chapters on Pashto and Urdu horror films, which many of you probably would not be aware of. We have chapters on slaps and izzat as well. So there's a little bit for everyone, I think, in this book, which is, at the end of the day, when you see something that finally being produced, it was hugely gratifying that the book turned out the way it has. One other thing that I'd say is that we finished the content of the book almost 12 months ago. And then it took us a further 12 months to put the visuals together. The number of posters one had to filter through, which ones to keep, which ones not to keep, where to position them. That took another 12 months to do. And Omar, of course, helped out hugely because a lot of the work is, the visual work is from his archives. I won't say very much more except just to thank everyone here for coming today as well, and also to the generosity of people that one comes across who gave their work to be displayed, usually without any charge, just a recognition of the fact that they wanted to be part of this initiative. People have been enormously generous. Many who don't even know that that the book is being discussed today. But the generosity of those people was what has really made this book. And the last thing I'll say at this point is that really it's a drop in the ocean. If you think about Pakistani cinema, every time I begin to do some work on it, I wonder, it's intimidating because there's so much to do.
Wonderful. Thanks very much indeed. Now I'd like to take you to Mr. Pran Nevile, and I'm sure most people would know him. He told me he's been coming to Lahore for the last 25 years, sir?
20 years.
20 years. And coming means coming back. He was born in Lahore, I think, brought up over there, and has written a wonderful book about Lahore. He has also been an art historian, and he has worked on films also. He has written on the marvels of Indian painting, etc. He's a lot of the wisdom and diversity and color of the subcontinent. He represents that color, and also, of course, seniority. So, Mr. Pran Nevile, when the films began, those days, began from there? Please.
Thank you very much. And of course, I got the copy of this book only just before I left Delhi. Of course, I have gone through it, not the whole of it, but gone through some contents. And I must say it's a very well brought out book. And I think there is not much literature on the Pakistani film or music or even the personalities, you see. And this book is very important, fills up a vacuum, I should say, information. And while going through the content, and especially the relationship of the film to society, and also film production in regional languages, which I was not very well aware of, that Urdu films were produced in East Pakistan also. So far as I am concerned, I only, after going through it, there is only one small, that there is not much study done in Pakistan about the film of pre-47. Lahore was, last year also there was a session on Bollywood and Lollywood, and I pointed out that Lahore was emerging as the biggest center of film production in the subcontinent. If partition had not taken place, Lahore would have surpassed Bombay, any place, because the artists were here, everything was here. And already we had almost 6 studios in Lahore itself. But no study has been done of pre-47 cinema film industry in Lahore, in Pakistan I should say, because that Lahore was the only center of filmmaking in Pakistan. And also about film personalities have been neglected. There is not much study done on the great artists of that period, who, then some of the artists came from India after partition and they just vanished. They had nothing, they didn't get anything. Khurshid comes to my mind, Rihanna comes to mind. Whoever came here except Bulbul-e Hind became Malkai Tarannum. Except Noor Jahan, no other artist flourished here. Of course, the music composers, they flourished. Khurshid Anwar was a great composer in India and also continued as one. He was a genius. So similarly, there is not, about the great artists, you see, there is, I hardly see in the media also anybody writing. On my part, I have done a lot of study about the Indian film industry and personalities also. And I have done the biography of Kundan Lal Sehgal. Of course, I was able to bring out these art books, coffee tables, with the support of some institution or KL Sehgal Centenary Celebration. I brought out a big coffee table book with the government grant, and they also encouraged me because they said that doesn't matter, whatever the cost, they will pick up 500 copies for the libraries. So that was enough, you see. These art books are very expensive to produce, and they have to be, they are not within the reach of people, you see. And that is why my KL Sehgal's coffee table books, Penguin brought out a paperback edition. So this book is very valuable, but for its price, you see, I think the same thing can be brought out later on in the popular form. Those pictures can be turned into black and white, and that can be within reach of people.
Yeah. Thank you very much. You know, because you must see this book. It is by itself, the book is a form of art itself. So the pictures, etc., make it that. And the pictures generally, as far as I know, come, Mr. Omar, is that they come from your archives. And also, there's something else I'd like to ask you specifically. You have directed and I think produced Ziba Khana. And, you know, there's the element of horror, the Frankensteinian kind of thing in film. What's the role of that? What's the role of horror and mystery? And especially, is there a difference between the horror and the nasty genre of films?
I hope I understand this, where he's coming from with this question. I think the motivation for making Ziba Khana was simply for the fact that I was getting envious of my father, who was writing books about his various aspects of his life, and I thought that it's about time that I left my mark here as well. So, and I'd studied film, and nothing had come of it, and I'd been fascinated by film all my whole life, watching Pakistani films down at Melody and all those broken down cinemas in Pindi at probably the age of 4 and 5, which is a little bit alarming. But so Ziba Khana came about simply out of a passion for horror movies, which I had my whole life, and I felt like it was like an ode, an homage to the films that I grew up watching and admiring and loving. The nastiness versus scariness, I think there's a lot of nastiness in it. Some of you may have seen it, some of you should not see it probably. But there was no other motivation other than to make something that was entertaining. And also at that stage, which was 2006 when we shot and 2007 when the film was issued, was a time when the local cinema had pretty much, the wheels had pretty much stopped. We didn't have this this new sort of afterlife that we are having right now. But at that stage, it was pretty much all over. And the idea to put Ziba Khana onto the scene was to sort of try and invigorate a moribund industry into accepting some change, even if it was dramatically different from what they would do, and it was speaking the language of blood and horror and not necessarily up to local taste, but it was something that attempted to shake things out of their inertia a little bit. And I think by being a huge nuisance to the censor board and by banging on doors which wouldn't normally open, perhaps by being such an irritant, it was helpful for others who have followed. And I'm happy to say that I was amongst the first to batter down the door to say that, look, it's time to let something new happen as well. And it's exciting for me to watch young people putting their films together now as a result.
Mr. Sumant Batra, He's a corporate and policy lawyer, and he has the founder of a number of creative projects to promote Indian heritage, culture, art, and literature. And these include the Kumaon Festival, Literary Festival, and the Taj Colloquium, based in Delhi. And this is about what is OECD?
Well, that's an organization of developed countries based in Paris.
So, with all these kind of interests, how do you relate to films?
Well, yes, of course, I must explain why. Probably Amina requested me to be here, but before I do that, I must congratulate on the book. It's a wonderful piece of literature, I would say, and also visual effort. You know, why Amina probably chose me to be on the panel was that when she was there at the Kumaon Literature Festival, she visited my museum on the Indian cinema memorabilia, and I happen to be one of the largest collectors of Indian cinema memorabilia in the country. So she presented a copy of the book to me when she was visiting New Delhi about a couple of weeks back. And then she said, why did you come and be on the panel? And I'm so glad that I got the opportunity to do that, mainly because of the reason that I could share my views together with you, because you've done an excellent piece of work there. So that probably explains partially why I am on the panel. But yes, you know, I've explained in the earlier panel that, you know, that my reason to sort of move to the preserving of the art, culture, heritage, and promoting it as well has come largely, the motivation has come from the fact that I realized that enough is not being done or was not being done at the establishment level, at the government level. And I thought that, you know, you can't leave everything to the policymakers. There's an effort that we must do as key stakeholders of the system. I have been a cinema lover, but lately there was a time when I didn't go to the movies at all for a very different reason, you know. But of course, you know, in the last 8 to 10 years, I have been very heavily involved in preserving and conserving the Indian cinema assets. And now the museum is going virtual. We've just signed an agreement with Google Cultural Institute to put the museum in the virtual space. So, you know, millions of assets will actually go up now for the world to be able to see, and quite a lot of that actually comprise of the pre-1947 era. And one would be able to sort of use them for research or just for visual delight.
Actually, I had hoped that at least one person in this panel would not know anything about films. But he is a preserver of them. He knows a lot about films. Everyone else, as you can see, does know much more than I. So I'm the only ignorant person. Therefore, let me ask you more questions. And this is for anyone to answer. What is the social significance of films in India and Pakistan? And what's the difference in that social significance for both societies? So may I ask first the Pakistani panelists and then the Indian panelists? One each. Omar sir.
I think, first of all, we tend to discuss films that are the ones that we like to discuss, and we tend to sort of hide under the carpet many of the films. In fact, a large percentage of Pakistani films we don't like to talk about, maybe because they don't suit our sensibilities, but the fact is they're out there and they're very much part of the content of Pakistani cinema. So one thing I actually like a lot about this book is it actually talks about some movies that we don't like to talk about, but they are very much part of Pakistani culture, Pakistani cinema culture, a reflection of our society, a reflection of politics that are happening in the land, and a reflection of everything else that's happening. It's reflected in the movies that you watch. More so than the serious and the good movies, perhaps the movies that are made for the public are more revealing in many ways as to what actually the atmosphere of the society of that day happens to be. So I find that one of the things that I enjoyed most was the fact that even a movie like Hasina Atom Bomb is mentioned and talked about. There are films which which we don't like to talk about. We like to talk about the genteel films of Wahid Murad and the sort of politically oriented ones. But 90% of the films are not those. So we need to talk about those as well if we want to be honest and if you want a proper analysis of what these films were trying to represent or say, what the language, what they were speaking, what they were about. Between the lines, I mean, you've got the example of Mola Jat, but there's so many others which we don't even know about. So I think a really positive step was to actually acknowledge the fact that there are 80% of movies that we don't talk about, but we should talk about them.
The social significance of films, etc.
Well, I think films have played a very important role in the taking up social issues. I remember in 1937, a film came, Duniya Na Mane. Now that was just targeted on the marriage of young girls to old people. Similarly, there are so many social issues taken by producers like B.R. Chopra, who always took this some subject. Same was the case with V. Shantaram. These two producers, you see, produced films always with some social problem, some social issue. And naturally, when the audience went to see these films, it created a great impact on them and awakening sort of thing that what they are showing is something evil in society which has to be eradicated. So film has a very important role to play. As I mentioned pre-47, I am sorry to say in India also, there is no attention being paid to pre-47. Many of them even don't know about it. I wrote a piece on the first superstar of Indian cinema. Can you imagine? Only BBC was interested. They have called me so many times. Nobody bothers in India who was Jahan Ara Kajan. Nobody bothers in India. Of course, I wrote about it and finally it was published. The great K.L. Sehgal, on his 4th April, nobody bothered in India. BBC asked me to come and give interview for 12 minutes in that program just 10 days back. So it is amazing, you see, that BBC is more interested. They invited me for Kanan Bala. Indians don't know who is Kanan Bala. From Kanan Bala to Kanan Devi, the greatest singer star of Indian cinema in 1930s. So very little work is done in India. Very few are interested also. But I still go on writing it and it is published.
Anything about the social significance from the point of view of anthropology? As you know, Dr. Rahman is an anthropologist of great renown in LAMS, so I'm asking him this question from an academic point of view, please.
Well, I think that if you look at the history of Pakistani cinema in terms of its decade-wise progression, you can see that film represents or is a reflection of what is happening in the country. And probably the film that is most often talked about in relation to this is Mola Jat, which of course was banned, and then there was a stay order, and it survived for years after that. But you know, it represented, or Mola Jat, Sultan Rahi's character, represented really the change which came about with the Afghan war, the political and economic changes that were happening at the time. This kind of boiling resentment that began to be represented in the form of Mola Jat's character. And you know that the military government felt threatened by this, you know, the outlet of aggression that would come when Sultan Rahi came on the screen. And there was such a reverberance with the audience and Rahi that which was really the reason why they decided to ban it, claiming that it was too violent. It was very violent, but this was a regime, after all, which used to have public floggings and put microphones nearby so that you could hear the cries of people. But really, you know, a film like that represented what was happening in society at the time. And you can, if you go through other films as well, you get those representations. In the 60s, there's a much more sort of hopeful outlook towards Pakistan's trajectory. And I think the films reflect that. The films reflect to some extent some of the possible social problems, concerns with urbanization, concerns with women moving into the economic sphere. And all of those come out in a number of particularly interesting films in the 60s. So, I've always felt that life is imitated in art, and in cinema, certainly that does seem to be the case.
I mean, actually, this is true about Frankenstein itself, etc., and a number of Victorian novels. There is this placid upper level, and then there is the level of violence, the heart of darkness, as Joseph Conrad put it. In that heart of darkness is the colonial, the actual chaining of people with trees in the Belgian Empire to get rubber. And so, in a sense, the film takes you to the heart of darkness, just as literature does. So, sir, aap bataiye, same thing.
I'd like to make two comments. One, जैसे परान साहब ने कहा, I do agree with him that not much was written about or research about Indian cinema, in particular the one which existed prior to 1947, which was essentially where the cinema was born. But I must say that over the last 8 to 10 years in particular, a lot of work has been done, and some very impressive work has been done, and it continues to be done, both in terms of research, both in terms of the archiving, both in terms of bringing out as a part of the curriculum in the art schools and in other forms of education. In fact, last morning only, I was discussing with Piyush, who's sitting in the audience, is a filmmaker from India, a very prominent filmmaker, that we are doing a series of 12 presentations with a very eminent institution in India on the contribution of women in the development of the entertainment industry, including the cinema. And Kanan Devi is one of the subjects that we have chosen, Devika Rani being another. So yes, enough may not have been done in the past, but there is certainly a great amount of attention that has been brought to this subject now. Now, as far as the role of cinema, as far as the social issues is concerned, I think the journey of Indian cinema as compared to the Pakistani cinema has been very, very different in India. Indian cinema has played a very wholesome role and also made films for all the stakeholders and not just for one section of the society and the audience. Now,
Are you talking about art?
no, I'm talking about everything. Like, for example, starting from 1947, the Indian cinema for the first 10 to 15 years focused more on nation building. Most of the films were made on nation building, nationalism, patriotism, and how, bringing in the spirit of how that we all as a nation should come together to build the nation afresh. And then, when we started having internal issues with regard to poverty, corruption, and etc., the Indian cinema made two kinds of films. One, entertaining films, which basically were addressed to keep the mood of the society lively, so that they could still have hope. They were entertained so that people who worked told all day long, in the evening they could see all the kind of movies that were purely entertaining. But then at the same point in time, rich parallel cinema was made, which brought out the issues in a very powerful way. Those were movies which were on caste system, to corruption, to atrocities, to the women issues, etc., etc. And then, of course, there came a time a little later when we were declared as an industry, as an industry officially. Then, of course, it was an opportunity where you convert it into a business opportunity, you upgrade the technology, and make it as a world-class cinema, and therefore then it became much more entertainment than just social issues anymore. But that also is shifting, if I may just take another 30 seconds, that over the last, if you observe, in the last 8 to 10 years, the cinema that is being made by young filmmakers is at par with international standards, and very rich, very deep, very entertaining at the same point in time.
Right. Now I come to a sensitive question, that of taboo in film. Now, I don't know whether this is taboo by the state or by the producer or by the public itself. but one can see taboo areas. First taboo area which one sees is, of course, sex, eroticism. And that should be common, I think, both Pakistan and India, possibly more in Pakistan and less in India. I once wrote an article about it, kissing is better than killing. And yes, that was because I was a member of the Film Censor Board. And I found that anything to do with, not just kissing, coming near was straight away dropped. And if someone hit a bullet and the 6 people died, that was okay. So one is that taboo area. We'll talk about it. The second one is there are certain sacred cows, and the military is one of them. You would think that this is true only about Pakistan, but it is not. It is also true about India. Of course, one does not show in the United States, for instance, also, but nevertheless, how come this kind of taboo work in films? Because they would never show the military actually exploiting or killing people in the areas in which they operate. And of course, the military does that in India, and it has done that in Pakistan also. Bangladesh, for instance, in India, Kashmir, and elsewhere. The military does that, but nobody takes that up. All other themes, extremely sensitive, are taken up, but this one is not. What happens? Does the state guide you, guide us? That means both India and Pakistan. Does the state guide us, or is it the producer who thinks this will not sell, or is it the public? What? Anyone can answer this, please. And sir, maybe we start from you, sir. Pran Nevile, sir. Please press this.
They don't want to show it to the public because it does not sell. It's all filmmaking is a commercial adventure, so they won't touch anything which doesn't sell.
Good answer. Ariha?
I think in Pakistan, I think that we have a very sort of love-hate relationship. I think cinema itself is seen as taboo. I can't find the quote that I had somewhere here, but right at the outset of Pakistan being made, there was a quotation from a minister who said that Muslims should not be involved in the process of filmmaking. It's best left to infidels, and that's quoted in Mushtaq Azdar's book.
Yes.
So the cinema itself was taboo, and maybe that's why it was something that people veered towards. It was the forbidden. And people would go off to it to try and break the rules. But apart from entire cinema being seen as taboo and people still having this relationship with it, I remember interviewing Nasir Adib, who's written hundreds of films for Pakistani and Punjabi cinema, Urdu and Punjabi cinema, and he said, the censor board would not let us write any films around certain topics. We couldn't write about the police, we couldn't write about Kashmir, we couldn't write about the military, we couldn't write, so everything sex, although if you see the films you would be surprised. But the point is, he said that all that was left for us was to write about personal enmity. And this is the writer of Maula Jatt, and he says that's all that we did again and again. It was safe. Otherwise, who's going to put money in and then find that your entire film is jeopardized because a censor board is not willing to pass it. And of course, the censor boards themselves have had a number of issues which, no clearly defined rules. It was just a matter of we'll pass this film and not pass this film. And again, much of the book that we've written has got films which, if you were to watch them, you would wonder how that film is being passed in the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, but it is passed. We even include, I think, a censor certificate which Omar provided us for some of these films with the cuts that had to be made. But in that kind of environment, it becomes very difficult. And I think even today, with the new wave of films, I don't think people are yet brave enough to touch upon certain issues. We were discussing this earlier, and there are so many stories to be told in Pakistan. But when are we going to hear them? I'm not sure.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Well, I think again the dynamics are a bit different in India because Indian cinema industry is perhaps one of the most secular industries within the country, and there's a huge amount of mutual regard and respect within the religions and the communities that form the Indian cinema industry. So, as a matter of respect for one another, there is an immense amount of self restraint in terms of what should be shown and what should not be shown. And of course, it's also in respect of the sensitivities that are involved towards the various cultures. But wherever, essentially, so therefore, wherever you imply a kissing scene, two flowers will appear on the screen and sort of nudge together. That was a typical way of showing for 20, 25 years. But for the younger generation, it is beginning to become a bit more explicit. And that's because the society is beginning to accept that form of display and demonstration of affection in public life, and therefore the cinema just wanted to keep pace and be realistic. So the censor has never really had to come out and in any form apply those rules to hammer these down. And whenever it has been done, the censor board has played a role, but whenever they have been proactive also, the cinema has protested, the artists have protested, the civil society has protested, and so has the media. And they have always prevailed. And therefore, to a large extent, the Indian cinema still governs on the basis of self-regulation rather than being regulated by the state.
So the military is still not shown.
Well, no, there is shown. I mean, if you see, there are movies. Well, it is, of course, in the negative light, in the, not just, you have films made on police corruption for 20 years. Yes, and Piyush will be able to tell you that military corruption, impliedly you know that this is the minister the film is talking about, or this is the episode in which the film has been made. The state has never been able to become more powerful than the Indian cinema. That is the best part, but that cinema as one institution has remained more powerful than the establishment itself.
I had some interesting episodes with the censor board here when I was dealing with my film. But other than that, I believe the censor rules were written decades ago. They've hardly been amended. So many things have changed, I mean, unrecognizably, and yet we remain in sort of this rigid block, which nobody has the guts or the courage to say that, look, this needs to be torn up and rewritten again so that it is more relevant. Because let's face it, the world's not the same as it was 30 or 40 years ago. There are huge double standards as far as we've got several films that advocate honor killing. We've successful hit films over the last 10 years, 15 years that I've watched that actually advocate murdering dancing girls or the girls who act in those stage theaters and so on. And the murderer, for example, in a movie I saw, in the end, the police let him go and he's given a pat on the back and said that you're doing a wonderful thing for society. Now, I've watched these films and I went to the censor board knowing all this, and I've watched a bunch of Pashto films from the 90s which are absolutely pornographic. There's no other word for them. You'd be embarrassed to actually watch what's on your screen. And having seen these, I went completely with enough ammunition to argue against anything that they were going to throw at me, because I read the rules actually, and the rules say that you won't be anti-state, you won't be anti-Islam, you won't show animal sex, horrible, nasty things, which nobody is interested in showing to begin with. But even any sort of subject matter that is adult-oriented is completely out the window. So all you get is this watered-down confection candy kind of film, which everyone is sick to death of watching, and they became completely redundant, nonsensical, living in this sort of bubble, and they're not related to anything. So I think the censors need to, perhaps they have been changing a little bit, because I noticed in the last year or so, which we never had before, or hardly ever had before, is that they're realizing that there are certain films that are not meant for 5-year-old children to watch. So let's put something on the cinema which says that these movies are for people who are of a certain age. So at least you can go and, watch something that is according to your development. Before, everything was lumped into one. I saw a movie recently, was it American Gangster or something, with Denzel Washington, about the heroin trade. And that I watched with 6, 7-year-old kids in the cinema in Rawalpindi not so long ago. So it doesn't make any sense to me at all. And as far as sex not selling, believe me, that's not true. Sex sells more than anything probably. There's a whole porn industry that's billions of dollars worth. Forget about that. What makes a film like Khatarnak in Punjabi run in a place like Karachi for over a year with packed shows throughout? Everyone knows that, but we don't talk about it because we all know the answer. Perhaps that's why we don't talk about it. But there are many other films like that which are very sexual, very lewd, very bawdy, and they are meant to make money, and that's exactly what they do.
Right. When you talked about Pashto films, I recall writing this article which I gave for this book. And I looked at the number of films, total number of films and the languages in which they were produced. And I found that initially there was this insistence upon the hero, etc., the positive characters speaking Lucknow's Urdu. And then this changed. And after that, the Urdu film actually lost out to the Punjabi film. That is, the number of Punjabi films produced was more. And Pashto, although Pashto again, both Pashto and Punjabi combined was simply much more than the Urdu one. And I found this very positive. One reason was that Punjabi, I have written in several of my books that it is not the language of power because it's not used in the domains of power, government and such, etc. But it is the language of intimacy. And it is certainly the language of the private sector in which you enjoy yourself. And this was also ratified and suggested by the fact that Punjabi films were actually popular. And Pashto films. One of the reasons which people gave was that Pashto films have raunchy dances, etc. That might be true. But that isn't the whole truth. The other part of the truth is that people do like to watch films in their language because they feel some connection with it. And that connection is with basically their own identity and their own people, etc. So in a sense, the popularization of Punjabi and Pashto film, etc., is, I think, something which one must see in a positive way. Or at least that is my view about it.
Can I just butt in for a second?
Yeah. But more than that, I'd like your view on this, as well as whether Indian films are going from Hindi to other directions. Please.
I think I was trying to find criticisms for the book as well. So one thing I thought, but this is a personal thing, because I think one of the most interesting things in Pakistani film development over the years is the advent of technology, and we're talking about the VCR in the mid-70s and what an impact it had. Now, they have mentioned it's talked about in the book significantly, but in my view, it has an impact that's even beyond what's discussed over here. And the 90s indeed saw a huge proliferation in these double language movies, Pashto Punjabi mostly, or Urdu Punjabi. The whole aesthetic of our cinema became like the Punjabi movies, because of the fact that everyone who spoke Urdu was watching Indian cinema then. The change had happened by the 90s, and we were watching, the rest of the audience was watching Pashto Punjabi movies, which have a different flavor and a different market to your Bollywood movies in general. Even today, Pashto movies survive, and Punjabi movies to a lesser extent survive. They're still watched, they're still made all the time. We don't read about them because they don't come in our new English newspapers. Their ads are pressed in the Urdu papers that we don't read. But they're there, they exist, and they're fairly popular as well. And the flavor, the language and everything is, the market of Pashto and Punjabi movies has not been eroded as severely as the market for Urdu movies, which was virtually destroyed in the 90s.
Just one sec. Punjabi movies are made in Canada now.
Yes, they are.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, in India, incidentally, the regional cinema has always been as popular. In fact, most of the Hindi movies were the remake of the Bengali cinema initially, and then Tamil cinema and even Malayali cinema. and they have produced some of the most iconic cinema stars, like Rajnikant is like demigod, to the south of India, and also to a large part of the remaining part of the country as well. So they have always been very popular, except that they have never been, or perhaps even aspired to go pan-India, essentially because of the language barriers. So the only way you could make those films reach to the rest of the part of the country was to remake them in Bollywood, and that is what happened. So, and they continue to grow even today, and in terms of the technology, in terms of the audience, they are at par with Bollywood, except that they don't get as kind of headlines outside of India as one would ideally expect.
I'm going to open it to the audience very soon, but just one last question. That's my own curiosity. That is, what in your view is the future of the Pakistani cinema? And I'm asking about the Pakistani cinema, and anyone can answer it.
Yeah, okay. I think that, and I remember saying this a couple of years ago at another seminar, that the Lollywood that we seem to know in the past is not something that will rise again. I think we are now moving to a different phase in Pakistani cinema, one that is driven by new technologies and people who've come back with different types of training. In ways it's unfortunate, but I think that Lollywood, if you want to call it that, never reinvested in itself, and as a result, it will die a natural death. So I think that cinema that we are going to see is going to be of a different kind. My only thing would be that we really should not and cannot compete with Bollywood, and we shouldn't try to do that really. I think it's a losing battle. I think that Pakistani cinema should try and find a niche for itself, just like English and French cinema did in opposition to Hollywood. Otherwise, you'll have a few films that resonate with the audience, but I think we can't do Bollywood better than Bollywood.
Right. Okay. So see, we will end on this note that we perhaps can't do Bollywood, but we could do something like the cinema in our neighbor Iran, which and a niche, yes, but possibly a different kind of niche. However, if one of the questions comes, then other people can also answer it. I see hands raised.
Yeah, I have the mic. I put up my hand right in the beginning, and और relevance भी है मेरा. I am a filmmaker from Mumbai, and I'd like to say, just wanted to point out a couple of things. You talked about taboo subjects, and specifically in the case of military action in Kashmir. Let me tell you, there are many films which have shown and been very critical of military action in Kashmir, Indian films, including my own, which is called Sikandar, but I can tell you Yahan and a recent Haider. They were all very critical of military action in Kashmir. So that's one thing. Not only that, Indian cinema has taken on the government many times, taken on the majority many times. They have also taken on the Hindu, rioting against the Muslims in Gujarat in movies like Parzania, in Firak. They have taken on any kind of subject, taboo, sex, widow remarriage, and it's been going on from the 60s and 70s. There's nothing taboo in India. We take it on. Yeah. And we make films, and even when the censor board goes against us, we go all the way to the Supreme Court, like in the case of Bandit Queen, and finally win. Yeah. So.
Thank you very much. This is just the kind of answer I wanted, because I want people here to know about it. They generally, people like myself don't know enough. So it's good that you give specific examples of films. Very good. Thank you very much. Sir.
Hello. जी. मेरा नाम राजू जमील है. I've been associated with the Pak showbiz on the television side past 50 years. But basically I'm a banker. अली मियाँ ने एक बहुत एंड में अच्छा जवाब दिया था आपको तारिक साहब कि आपने कहा था पाकिस्तान फिल्म का फ्यूचर क्या है. तो मैं इनके बिल्कुल इनकी बात से इत्तेफाक कर रहा हूँ. मेरे भाई ने पीछे बैठ के भी जो बताया इंडियन फिल्म इंडस्ट्री के बारे में, तो मैं पाकिस्तान फिल्म इंडस्ट्री को 1947 से लेता हूँ, इंडियन फिल्म इंडस्ट्री को तो अब 100 साल होने को आ रहे हैं। तो जो कुछ उनके यहाँ हो रहा है वो 100 साल की बाद, बहुत कुछ उसमें तरक्की होने के बाद, मार खाने के बाद, बहुत कुछ होने के बाद हो रहा है। हम सन 47 से फिल्म बना रहे थे, जो हमारी पहली फिल्में थी वो ऐसी फिल्में बनाई गई थी जिनके गाने हम आज तक गाते हैं। वादा 1954 में बनाई गई थी, और जब तेरे शहर से गुजरता हूं अब तक जानते हैं लोग कि किसने गाया और कितनी दफा लोग गाते हैं उसे। आजकल की 2004 या 2003 से जो पाकिस्तानी फिल्में बननी शुरू हुई हैं, वहां मैं अली मियां से एग्री करता हूं कि वो पनपेंगी नहीं, वो कमर्शियल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से बन रही हैं। उनका ग्लैमर जो होता है वो रेड कारपेट होता है जिस दिन वो रिलीज हो रही होती हैं, और 1-1.5 महीने में जब वो आदमी कमा लेता है जितना उसने खर्च किया होता है तो वो भूल जाता है। मैं मिसाल के तौर पे 2003 से लेकर आज तक जो कोई फिल्म बनी है उसकी एक स्टोरी या उसका गाना किसी से पूछना चाहता हूं, मुझे एक सुना दे, कोई गाना ही नहीं है। और गाना लेके चलता है फिल्म को अगले 50 साल या 60 साल। तो तारीख में नहीं बन रही। आप बना रहे हैं फिल्म पब्लिक के एंटरटेनमेंट के लिए, बड़ा एंजॉय कर रहे हैं, बिन रोए और ये और जवानी दीवानी नहीं आनी जो भी है वो सब कुछ दे आर एंजॉइंग, ठीक है, वो वक्ती एंजॉयमेंट है। फ्यूचर के लिए आप पाकिस्तान फिल्म इंडस्ट्री के लिए कुछ नहीं कर रहे। मैं अली मियां से बिल्कुल इत्तेफाक करता हूं।
Sorry. Thank you very much. Very interesting debate on cinema. I wanted to hear a bit more about the book that is being launched. मगर कोई बात नहीं, सिनेमा के ऊपर भी अच्छी डिबेट थी और बहुत टिपिकल सी थी। इंडियन सिनेमा इज़ द ग्रेटेस्ट एंड पाकिस्तानी सिनेमा इज़ ट्रैश काइंड ऑफ कॉन्सेप्ट्स आ रहे थे जो मेरे ख्याल है हमेशा ही ऐसे सुनने में आते हैं। आई वॉज एक्सपेक्टिंग मोर फ्रॉम उमर के आपने क्लासिक्स देखी हों, पाकिस्तानी क्लासिक्स बड़ी बड़ी कमाल हैं। आई डोंट थिंक कि पाकिस्तानी सिनेमा हैज़ बीन ट्रैश। The songs or the classics, we show them every Saturday here at Lok Virsa with a lot of pride. तो वो वाले एस्पेक्ट्स हैं। प्लस मैं कहूँगी मेलोडीज़ भी अभी भी चल रही हैं। मुझे तो बहुत सारे गाने आते हैं पिछले 10 साल की फिल्मों के भी। शोएब मंसूर की जो मूवीज़ आई हैं, they've been breakthrough, they've changed the whole course of cinema. So I think that our cinema is really, it's a revival or some kind of a renaissance, and one feels very proud about it, and it has not gone into a revival mode by shoddy tactics, मगर बहुत sophisticated तरीके से revival हो रहा है। On the book, I would say, क्योंकि मैंने वो देखी है, just a comment because I felt कि there needs to be a little bit on the book. I think it is a very good read for general public, not only for people who are into films. एक तो become familiar with the history and the juxtaposing the political patterns, contextual socio-political patterns with the films, और फिर बीच में ह्यूमर भी है उसके, कई चैप्टर्स जो हैं काफ़ी फ़नी भी हैं, वो अपने पे हंसना भी अच्छा लगता है। तो उस तरह का एक मैं ये कहना चाह रही थी। और एक बस आखिरी पॉइंट ये कि मुझे बहुत सरप्राइज़ हुई जब आपने कहा कि इंडियन फिल्में बिल्कुल सेक्युलर हैं, क्योंकि मेरा ख्याल था एज अ व्यूअर कि मंगलसूत्र का पावर और भगवान का पावर और हर फिल्म के आखिर में मंदिर से जवाब लेना, आई थॉट वाज अ वेरी बिग पैटर्न। तो आई एम सरप्राइज्ड। मंगलसूत्र तो हमारे मतलब वो तो उसका तो इन्फ्लुएंस इधर उधर भी बहुत आया। तो आई थॉट कि इट वाज वेरी रिलीजियस, मगर इट्स गुड टू हियर योर पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू।
दिस इज ऑफ कोर्स दिस आस्क फॉर एन आंसर। तो आपके जो लास्ट पार्ट है उसके ये जवाब दे सकते हैं प्लीज टू।
What he meant was not that Indian films are secular. What he meant was the Indian film industry is secular. वहां पे मुसलमान, क्रिश्चियन, हिंदू सब एक साथ काम करते हैं और कोई एक दूसरे को ये धर्म के नजरों से नहीं देखता। हमारे सब सुपरस्टार्स मुसलमान हैं, आप जानते हैं। तो वो बोल रहे थे।
और एक और बात है जो मैं बताना चाहता हूँ, इंडियन सिनेमा में मेरे पाकिस्तानी दोस्त कहते थे इंडियन फिल्म सिनेमा में कभी कोई मुस्लिम कैरेक्टर को नेगेटिव नहीं दिखाते। किस लिए नहीं दिखाते? कहते देयर इज नो आंसर। क्या हिंदुस्तानी मुस्लिम क्राइम ही नहीं करते कोई?
सर आप आजकल की फिल्में देखिए, काफी टेररिज्म की हो रही है, मुस्लिम कैरेक्टर्स ही है वहाँ पे टेररिस्ट, हिंदू नहीं है टेररिस्ट। तो एक दूसरी चीज, और पाकिस्तानी एक्टर्स भी अभी आज इंडिया में राज कर रहे हैं. फवाद खान आपने छोड़ा है हमारे पर.
मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि इंडियन फिल्म में कोई
और सबसे बड़ा तो आपने ताहिर शाह छोड़ा है बॉम्ब.
कोई किसी मुस्लिम को नेगेटिव करेक्टर नहीं रहा.
There are questions also coming, so let's take the questions. And the answer was about to come from here, but I think we will postpone this answer till the next question comes because it seems to be related. Aap boliye. Please. Yes.
My name is Asim Awan. I'm just a viewer, like cinema. My question is why there is no Sindhi cinema in Pakistan? There's a rich cultural tradition. There's a strong Sindhi media. There's a Sindhi drama. There's a Sindhi newspaper. There's a wide audience there. But why we do not have any tradition of the Sindhi language popular media here?
Why isn't there any Sindhi cinema? Sindhi cinema, right? Okay, right. वो है लेकिन थोड़ी है ना. So he means that matter बलोची भी नहीं है. Khair, anyway, if someone wants to answer this.
There are a handful of Sindhi movies have been made over the years. It's not very prolific, but I think the bottom line is that they need to earn some money. And if they don't earn money, they won't make them.
I would like to clarify there is no such thing as Hindi cinema. What they call Hindi is Urdu. All writers, great lyricists, they have been all in Indian film you can find, even the dialogue. There are more Urdu words than Hindi words.
जी वो ठीक है. मतलब मैं तो अगर एग्जांपल एक ही देना चाहूँगा कि पीयूष ने कहा कि जो मुस्लिम स्टार्स सुपरस्टार्स हैं वो इंडियन मुस्लिम्स हैं, इंडियन सिटीजन्स हैं. आज आप फहद खान एक्टिंग करते हैं, ही इज़ द हार्ट थ्रोब ऑफ द इंटायर विमेन. आई मीन इससे बड़ा एग्जांपल क्या हो सकता है कि फहद खान हमारी इंडियन पाकिस्तानी होने के बावजूद भी इंडियन फिल्म में ना सिर्फ एक्ट करते हैं बट उतनी उनकी पॉपुलैरिटी है. आप उनके सोशल मीडिया पे फॉलोइंग देखिए, फ़ैन मीडिया देखें, इंक्लूडिंग माई वाइफ, शी इज़ अ ग्रेट फ़ैन ऑफ हिज. सो हमारे यहाँ पर सिनेमा के साथ रिलीजन को एसोसिएट नहीं किया जाता. 0% है, ये मैं आपको गारंटी दे सकता हूँ. बाकी जगह जो भी कुछ हो भी इट्स एन इंडस्ट्री जिसमें इतनी डीप रूटेड जो है इंटीग्रेशन है, आप उसको चाहें तो भी अलग नहीं कर सकते.
Same Zindagi channel, which is for last 2 years, Zindagi channel, round the clock people watch it.
अच्छा जी, there is a hand up there. लीजिए.
My question is about you talked about Pashto films. इन पश्तो फिल्म्स वो उसमें तो डबिंग होती है ना, डबिंग. और जिस लड़कियों को वहाँ कास्ट किया जाता है, दे आर फ्रॉम पंजाब से कास्ट किया जाता है. वहाँ पे तो पश्तून रिप्रेजेंट ही नहीं होते. और भाई ने क्वेश्चन किया अबाउट सिंध फिल्म्स. वो सिंधी को या बलोच को रिप्रेजेंट करना पाकिस्तान में, दैट इज नॉट पॉसिबल बिकॉज इन अ कंट्री वेयर आर्मी प्रोड्यूसेस मूवीज, हाउ कैन यू एक्सेप्ट representing those people. In India, Maoists are represented, lower caste people are represented like Pandit Queen, Dil Se. Here in Pakistan, what are produced, they are against, people are represented in a kind of violent way, like Pashtun are represented like violent, Baloch, violent, Sindhi, Awadera. That is something rubbish.
No, but I'm coming. I can see you and Dr. Tughril ने पहले रेस किया था और उसके बाद में आपके पास. तुगरल साहब आप बोलिए, then I'm coming to you. तुगरल साहब को दीजिए. No, I'm coming to you.
Assalamu alaikum. I have nothing to do with filmmaking or acting, but I had a very brief acting career as a 17-year-old. I played Luca in Arms and the Men, and the producer-director was Tariq Rahman Saab in Pakistan Military Academy. I just want to bring across one historical fact. Farhan Bukhari Saab said that some ministers said that going into film was taboo. One of my uncles, he's still alive, mashallah, 93 or 94 years old. He was an inveterate letter writer, and he used to write letters to all Indian leaders across the board, and that included Muhammad Ali Jinnah Saab, Qaid-e-Azam. And he gave that letter to me, in which he wrote to Qaid-e-Azam Saab saying that, is it good for Muslims, there was no Pakistan, is it good for Muslims to join the film industry? And Mr. Jinnah replied to him. I have a copy of that letter. It was published in Express Tribune. If you Google with my name, perhaps you'll come across it, in which he said, Mr. Jinnah said, I would like the Muslimans, that's how he used to talk about Muslims, I would like the Muslimans to join the film industry. And he said, I watch movies. He gave examples of certain movies. So again, we have a selective amnesia. We don't highlight those points. Thank you very much, sir, for giving me time.
I'd just like to say one thing. It just shows how far we've gone from Jinnah's Pakistan.
Thank you. Actually, my question is to Dr. Rahman's remark, and you may want to answer it. When you said that people like the regional cinemas, you mentioned Pashto cinema and Punjabi cinema because they identify with it. I just wanted to ask you, what is shown in these films, do they represent the Punjabi and the Pashtun identity?
It's true that they do not. That was the question there. But then, which film does? I mean, except for the art movies made elsewhere in different languages, in India and Pakistan, etc., they don't. But if you look at the Urdu film or the Hindi film, that doesn't represent any culture either. So, as far as realism is concerned, our movie follows the melodramatic school from the beginning. The Parsi theatre was that. And this film takes over from the Parsi theatre. So this is the sentimental, melodramatic style in which there is singing and dancing, etc. And that is one's fantasy. That is one's fantasy. It is not reality. So this does not represent anyone except, of course, the art films. But that is by itself does not matter. Still people enjoy them and identify with them. So if there is a film in the Punjabi language, then whether one identifies with it or one considers it fantasy, one enjoys that. And my point is that making a film in Punjabi or Pashto is an enjoyable kind of experience for people speaking those languages. And that's why I consider that positive. I know that people object to the raunchy dances, etc. Personally, to me, that matters very little. What matters to me is actually the violence sometimes produced on them. That does matter to me. But the sex part doesn't. There's far more sex part if you click one button, the internet, there's far more sex available and of a violent kind. So this really doesn't matter much. I'm going to sum up now. This book we didn't talk much about the book because the book is about film and we talked about that. But if someone wants to introduce a course on filmmaking, etc., on appreciation of film as from the social science point of view, from the anthropological point of view, from the mass media point of view, from the literary point of view, then this book will provide a beginning. And that is the significance of this book. It has an academic significance. It is about a genre which is not very well represented in academia. Sir, one moment. Let me finish. The question answer thing is finished, but if you are very keen, I'll give you a very short time. But let me finish. So the thing is that, in a sense, after Haris Gazdar, this is the first book, a serious book on Pakistani films. It's a serious book on the genre called the film, and not on individual films. Of course, there are articles on individual films, but basically, this is a book on film, and I think besides other people everywhere, the reader anywhere, I think this is a book which needs entrance into the university. And here I'll end, because I promise you, sir, you give me a question in 1 minute, sir.
I strongly agree with the view of Fozia Saeed. The picture which is shown by Mr. Batra is very rosy, that the film industry in India is secular and, things like that. लेकिन मैं आपको बता दूं कि शाहरुख खान है, लेकिन वो इंटरव्यूज देखेंगे, वो कहते हैं मैं गीता भी पढ़ता हूँ. अगर गीता नहीं पढ़ेंगे तो उसको, और what is happening to Amir Khan and the other chaps, the Muslim chaps these days. So I strongly disagree with your point of view and agree with the views of Fozia Saeed. So a short comment or,
Okay, well, that's the beauty of it. No. This
मैं कुछ और कहना चाहता हूँ. आप we can agree to disagree. एक सेकंड में कुछ और बात करता हूँ.
इसके बारे में इसका जवाब की कोई जरूरत नहीं.
इसका जवाब की जरूरत नहीं है.
वैसे if you
मैं
want,
कुछ और कहना
time is ended.
Just 30 seconds. मैं ये कहना चाहता हूँ. जी, मैं ये कहना चाहता था कि इस किताब में जितने भी एसेज हैं, उस हर पे एक नई अलग किताब की जा सकती है. जी, और उसमें से कम एक दो ऐसे सब्जेक्ट हैं जिसमें मैं चाहूँगा कि हम मिलकर करें. और उससे जो कि 1947 से पहले का एलिमेंट है वो निकल करके आए, जो हमारे पास नॉलेज बेस है, जो हमारे पास डाटा है, एसेट हैं, हम आपके साथ उसको शेयर करें और मिल करके एक अच्छी सी कुछ किताब करें ताकि और इसको स्ट्रेंथन करें.
Thank you very much indeed, all the participants, Pran, Nevile Saab, Dr. Ali, Ms. Batra, and you, sir. Omar Saab, thank you very much, and the audience, you've been a wonderful audience. Thanks very much indeed. Please buy this book. Thanks very much.
I would like to thank all of our speakers for this wonderful session. If anybody wants to purchase Cinema in Society, the room is available. The book is available for sale at the back of the room, where Ali Khan will also sign.